I apologize ahead of time for the yellowness of this video. I've been trying to fix it. I can't figure out why it's so yellow. Maybe because it's nighttime and I have yellow lights. I should fix that. But sorry. Hey guys, it's me Bridget. Welcome to another video. Today we will be working on chapter 8 of the Women Who Run with Wolves books because I'm staying on that right now. This is actually going to be a 4-part video, so we're doing a marathon. Come back here tomorrow for the next part, and the next day, and the next day until we're done. Before we get into the video, make sure that you like this video because I really appreciate when you like my videos. And make sure you are subscribed and you've hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I come out with more videos, especially being that I'll be coming out with videos for the next 3 days about this. Like, you should definitely have your notifications on so you'll know when the next part comes out. Just, you know, makes sense. So today's chapter is called Self-Preservation, Identifying Leg Traps, Cages, and Poisoned Bait. So to begin off this chapter, we will begin talking about the feral woman. You may ask, what is the feral woman? In the book it says, in the Oxford English Dictionary, the word feral derives from Latin fer, meaning wild beast. In common usage, a feral creature is one who was once wild, then domesticated, and who has reverted back to a natural or untamed state once again. I postulate the feral woman as one who was once in a natural psychic state, that is, in her rightful wild mind, then, later, captured by whatever turn of events, thereby becoming overly domesticated and deadened in proper instincts. When she has opportunity to return to her original wildish state, she too easily steps into all manner of traps and poisons. Because her cycles and protective systems have been tampered with, she is now at risk in what used to be her natural wild state. No longer wary and alert, she easily becomes prey. Feral women of all ages, and especially the young, have a tremendous drive to compensate for long famines and exiles. They are endangered by excessive and mindless striving toward people and goals that are not nutrient, substantive, or enduring. No matter where they live or in what time, there are cages waiting always. 2 small lives in which women can be lured or pushed. If you have ever been captured, if you have ever endured hambre del alma, a starvation of the soul, if you have ever been trapped, and especially if you have a drive to create, it is likely that you have been or are a feral woman. The feral woman is usually extremely hungry for something soulful, and often will take any poison disguised on a pointed stick, believing it to be the thing for which her soul hungers. I think this is something that a lot of people go through throughout life, because I was watching a video earlier by another YouTuber, and she was talking about a book that she's been reading that, I don't know, basically she was talking about the reason why she had left YouTube, and deep down, really, the gist of her video, the reason why she left YouTube, the reason why a lot of people leave things behind or can't stay focused on a path that they've gone down is because it's very important as human beings to find purpose, and if you don't feel purpose in what you're doing, it's not going to last for very long. In order to no longer be the feral woman, one must learn to swerve, to recognize wrong turns and poisoned pleasures. In the book it says, in order to avoid these snares and enticements that are tripped by a woman's time spent in capture and famine, we must be able to see them in advance and sidestep them. We have to redevelop insight and caution. We have to learn to veer. To be able to see the right turns, we have to be able to see the wrong ones. So, let's get into the story where we can learn about what it's like to become a feral woman, what it's like to be a feral woman, and then what it's like to come out of being a feral woman. So Estes kind of writes like a foreword into the story that I wanted to read with you guys and then read the actual story. She says, the following is a Magyar Germanic version of the red shoes that my Aunt Teresa used to tell us when we were children. One that I use here with her blessing. In her artful way, she always began the tale by saying, "Look at your shoes and be thankful they are plain, for one has to live very carefully if one's shoes are too red." This story is called The Red Shoes. Once there was a poor motherless child who had no shoes, but the child saved cloth scraps wherever she found them, and over time sewed herself a pair of red shoes. They were crude, but she loved them. They made her feel rich even though her days were spent gathering food in the thorny woods until far past dark. But one day, as she trudged down the road in her rags and her red shoes, a gilded carriage pulled up beside her. Inside was an old woman who told her she was going to take her home and treat her as her own little daughter. So to the wealthy old woman's house they went, and the child's hair was cleaned and combed. She was given pure white undergarments and a fine wool dress, and white stockings and shiny black shoes. When the child asked after her old clothes, and especially her red shoes, the old woman said the clothes were so filthy and the shoes so ridiculous that she had thrown them into the fire, where they were burnt to ashes. The child was very sad, for even with all the riches surrounding her, the humble red shoes made by her own hands had given her the greatest happiness. Now she was made to sit still all the time, to walk without skipping, and to not speak unless spoken to. But a secret fire began to burn in her heart, and she continued to yearn for her old red shoes more than anything. As the child was old enough to be confirmed on the day of innocence, the old woman took her to an old crippled shoemaker to have a special pair of shoes made for the occasion. In the shoemaker's case, there stood a pair of red shoes made of the finest leather that were finer than fine. They practically glowed. So even though red shoes were scandalous for church, the child, who chose only with her hungry heart, picked the red shoes. The old lady's eyesight was so poor she could not see the color of the shoes, and so she paid for them. The old shoemaker winked at the child and wrapped the shoes up. The next day, the church members were agog over the shoes on the child's feet. The red shoes shone like burnished apples, like hearts, like red-washed plums. Everyone stared, even the icons on the walls. Even the statues stared disapprovingly at her shoes. But she loved the shoes all the more. So when the pontiff intoned, the choir hummed, the organ pumped, the child thought nothing more beautiful than her red shoes. By the end of the day, the old woman had been informed about her ward's red shoes. "Never, never wear those red shoes again," the old woman threatened. But the next Sunday, the child couldn't help but choose the red shoes over the black ones, and she and the old woman walked to church as usual. At the door to the church was an old soldier with his arm in a sling. He wore a little jacket and had a red beard. He bowed and asked permission to brush the dust from the child's red shoes. The child put out her foot, and he tapped the soles of her shoes with a little wig-a-jig-jig song that made the soles of her feet itch. "Remember to stay for the dance," he smiled and winked at her. Again, everyone looked askance at the girl's red shoes. But she so loved the shoes that were bright like crimson, bright like raspberries, bright like pomegranates, that she could hardly think of anything else, hardly hear the service at all. So busy was she turning her feet this way and that, admiring her red shoes, that she forgot to sing. As she and the old woman left the church, the injured soldier called out, "What beautiful dancing shoes!" His words made the girl take a few little twirls right there and then. But once her feet had begun to move, they would not stop, and she danced through the flower beds and around the corner of the church until it seemed as though she had lost complete control of herself. She did a gavotte, and then a charja, and then waltzed herself through the fields across the way. The old woman's coachman jumped up from his bench and ran after the girl, picked her up, and carried her back to the carriage. But the girl's feet in the red shoes were still dancing in the air as though they were still on the ground. The old woman and the coachman tugged and pulled, trying to pry the shoes off. It was such a sight, all hats askew and kicking legs, but at last the child's feet were calmed. Back home, the old woman slammed the red shoes down high on the shelf and warned the girl never to touch them again. But the girl could not help looking at them and longing for them. To her, they were still the most beauteous things on the face of the earth. Not long after, as fate would have it, the old woman became bedridden, and as soon as her doctors left, the girl crept into the room where the red shoes were kept. She glanced at them so high on the shelf. Her glance became a gaze, and her gaze became powerful desire. So much so that the girl took the shoes from the shelf fastened them on, feeling it would do no harm. But as soon as they touched her heels and toes, she was overcome by the urge to dance. And so, out the door she danced, and then down the steps. First in a gavotte, then a sarja, and then in big daring waltz turns in rapid succession. The girl was in her glory and did not realize she was in trouble until she wanted to dance to the left, and the shoes insisted on dancing to the right. When she wanted to dance round, the shoes insisted on dancing straight ahead. And as the shoes danced the girl, rather than the other way around, they danced her right down the road, through the muddy fields, and out into the gloomy, dark forest. There, against a tree, was the old soldier with the red beard, his arm in a sling, and dressed in his little jacket. "Oh my," he said, "what beautiful dancing shoes." Terrified, she tried to pull the shoes off, but as much as she tugged, the shoes stayed fast. She hopped on one foot and then the other, trying to take off the shoes, but her one foot on the ground kept dancing even so, and her other foot in her hand did its part of the dance also. And so dance and dance and dance she did, over highest hills and through the valleys. In the rain and in the snow and in the sunlight, she danced. She danced in the darkest night and through sunrise, and she was still dancing in twilight as well. But it was not good dancing. It was terrible dancing, and there was no rest for her. She danced into a churchyard, and there a spirit of dread would not allow her to enter. The spirit pronounced these words over her: "You shall dance in your red shoes until you become like a wraith, like a ghost, till your skin hangs from your bones, till there is nothing left of you but entrails dancing. You shall dance door to door through all the villages, and you shall strike each door 3 times, and when people peer out, they will see you and fear your fate for themselves. Dance, red shoes, you shall dance." The girl begged for mercy, but before she could plead further, her red shoes carried her away. Over the briars she danced, through the streams, over the hedgerows, and on, dancing, still dancing, till she came to her old home, and there were mourners. The old woman who had taken her in had died. Yet even so, she danced on by, and dance she did, as dance she must. In abject exhaustion and horror, she danced into a forest where lived the town's executioner, and the axe on his wall began to tremble as soon as it sensed her coming near. "Please," she begged the executioner as she danced by his door, "please cut off my shoes to free me from this horrid fate." And the executioner cut the straps of the red shoes with his axe, but still the shoes stayed on her feet. And so she cried to him that her life was worth nothing and he should cut off her feet. So he cut off her feet, and the red shoes with the feet in them kept on dancing through the forest, over the hill, and out of sight. And now the girl was a poor cripple and had to find her own way in the world as a servant to others. And she never ever again wished for red shoes. The end. In the book it said, the psychological truth in The Red Shoes is that a woman's meaningful life can be pried, threatened, robbed, or seduced away from her unless she holds on to or retrieves her basic joy and wild worth. The tale calls our attention to traps and poisons we too easily take onto ourselves when we are caught in a famine of wild soul. Without a firm participation with the wild nature, a woman starves and falls into an obsession of feel-betters, leave me alones, and love me, please. So through this story, in order to avoid becoming the Pharaoh woman, or if we are the Pharaoh woman, find our steps to come out of it, we must dissect the mistakes that women make that lead to the entrapment. However much it is definitely not our fault if we are entrapped in that, we also can take responsibility for the steps that lead us to it, and thereby taking responsibility for those steps, we can control our own lives and avoid certain paths. The story represents a woman losing her wild life and never going through the steps to reclaim it and save herself. This story can happen to any of us, but real life is not as set in stone as fairy tales, and while we may become a Pharaoh woman at one point, we can always save ourselves from that fate. This is only the beginning. Even if a woman has hit rock bottom, there's still more below. In the book, Estes says, "At bottom is the best soil to sow and grow something new again. In that sense, hitting bottom, while extremely painful, is also the sowing ground." Although we would never wish this on anyone, this feral state, women who have experienced the feral state are actually at an advantage and are stronger than most. The experience of loss, of destruction, and then rebuilding actually puts you at a unique advantage. It builds a unique sense of strength. In fairy tales, we have endings, and those endings go on forever. They're infinite. In life, life is finite, and it doesn't go on forever, but it never ends. There's never a point before it actually ends where it's over. So therefore, within life, while it may be finite in length, there are infinite chances to change. In the book it says, "So the woman who has danced out of control, who has lost her footing, lost her feet, and understands the bereft state at the end of the fairy tale, has a special and valuable wisdom. She is like a saguaro, a fine and beautiful cactus that lives in the desert. Saguaros can be shot full of holes, carved upon, knocked over, stepped on, and they still live. Still they store life-giving water, still they grow wild and repair themselves over time. But in order to know how to repair ourselves, we must know what wrong turns we made in the first place. To begin dissecting the story, we have to begin at the initial introduction to wild, passionate life, which is with the handmade red shoes. The handmade shoes are marks of her rising out of a mean psychic existence into a passionate life of her own design. The shoes represent hope and passion and the ability for things to turn better. The girl is poor and hungry and an orphan, but the shoes are the first step in representing her establishing herself in her own passionate life that she's created. They are her own. They come from her. They don't come from anywhere else. They also don't completely change her life, but they give her a glimpse into the future that she could create for herself. And they bring her joy. The fact that this joy and hope is brought to her by shoes specifically also have a deeper meaning that Estes talks about in the book. This version of the tale grows out of our having lived in the cold north countries where shoes are understood as instruments of survival. Keeping the feet dry and warm keeps a person alive in bitter cold and wet. I can remember my aunt telling me that to steal someone's only pairs of shoes in the winter was a crime equal to murder. A woman's creative and passionate nature is at the same risk if she cannot hold on to her sources of growth and joy. These are her warmth, her protection. The symbol of shoes can be understood as a psychological metaphor. They protect and defend what we stand on, our feet. In archetypal symbolism, feet represent mobility and freedom. In that sense, to have shoes to cover the feet is to have the conviction of our beliefs and the wherewithal to act on them. Without psychic shoes, a woman is unable to negotiate inner and outer environments that require acuity, sense, caution, and toughness. The shoes here represent the self-esteem and value that one receives when one takes the first step into committing to creating a passionate and wild inner life. They are the platform on which all other passionate wild life will be built upon. To take away this first accomplishment and this first representation of a commitment to your own passionate inner wild life is like taking the foundation out from under a house. It will leave the rest of the house shaking and crumbling until it comes down. Also, the color of the shoes has meaning as well. Red has two spiritual meanings, being life and sacrifice. In the book it says, "To live a vibrant life, we must make sacrifices of various sorts. Problems arise when there is much sacrifice but no life forthcoming from it all. Then, red is the color of blood loss rather than blood life. This is exactly what occurs in the tale. One sort of vibrant and beloved red is lost when the child's handmade red shoes are burnt. This sets up a yearning, an obsession, and finally an addiction to another kind of red, the one of fast-breaking, cheap thrills, sex without soul, the one that leads to a life without meaning." The fact that both the handmade shoes were red and also the shoes that she bought meant that in her eyes, she was seeing the same thing, but the key is that she had lost all of the instinct that would have told her that the red shoes that were in the store were not the same as the shoes that she made for herself. And they're not the same for the simple fact that she didn't make them for herself and that they aren't a part of her inner passionate life at all. Left alone, the girl with the red shoes made of scraps would have led her to a fulfilling, passionate life where she may have accomplished many things along her way and figuring out how to take care of herself and live her life. She would have progressed in her talent. And also therefore her wild intuition. In the book, it says, "The fact that the shoes are red indicates that the process is going to be one of a vibrant life, which includes sacrifice. This is right and proper. The fact that these shoes are handmade and pieced from scraps points to the child symbolizing the creative spirit, who, being motherless and untaught for whatever reasons, has pieced this all together for her using native perception. And brava! What a fine and soulful accomplishment." She made those shoes off of pure instinct. No one taught her how to do that, which meant it came from her wild soul. It came from her soul, the shoes, period. The pure joy that would have come from continuing down that path and continuing to learn how to make shoes and grow in that whatever creative life was down her path would have kept her focused on that path over time. That type of pure joy from the continued soulful pursuit of creative accomplishments is the actual instinctual type of joy that a woman is looking for through life and that she receives through connection with the wild spirit. Unfortunately, as we know by the story, the girl is distracted by the gilded carriage with all of its luxury coming in to take care of all of her needs and take away all of her hopes and dreams. And we will begin talking tomorrow about the traps of the gilded carriage, the traps of luxury. So that is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this and I hope you guys are excited for tomorrow. Make sure that you like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure that you keep up with the marathon and all of the other chapters from Women Who Run with Wolves by subscribing to me and also hitting your notification bell so that you'll be notified when I come out with more videos. I love you guys the most so much and I will see you tomorrow. Bye! Woo! Wait, before you go, I'm sure I already asked you guys this, and hopefully you already have, but just in case you haven't, make sure you like and comment on this video, and go ahead and share it with your friends too. If you guys enjoyed that video and would like to continue to hang out with me, go ahead and follow my Instagram, yo! I post on there way more often than I do YouTube, and I also respond to my DMs so we could be real friends in like real life, you know? Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And if you're looking for more stuff to watch, this was my last video and I think you'd really like this video right here. So check it out. I'll be waiting. Go ahead and click whenever you're ready. I'll be waiting. Okay, hopefully you've clicked now. Bye.